we talked about caregiving. And we looked at the passage from Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12 that says, honor your father and your mother. And there in Exodus chapter 20, we have the fifth commandment, and we know it very well. There are many facets to the fulfillment of this command, and it is impossible for us to cover all of the nuances of it. And even then, there are going to be specific situations where your particular family, with your particular dynamic, that nobody really understands outside of your family or even knows about, except for you. Now, it's easy for anybody else to sit on the sideline and look at another situation and say, well, if that were me, this is what I would do. Well, number one, it's not you. And number two, you don't know what you would do since you may not be privy to the information that they have. The point in the lesson is that caregiving on any level is difficult. It's not easy. And for those who provide care for parents or grandparents as they age, need our prayers and they need our encouragement. Because it's not easy living in a world of role reversal. And I think sometimes, when we pray, we ask God to be with parents and we ask God to be with children. But do we ever pray for caregivers? Sometimes I think that gets overlooked. Caregivers need to be in our prayers. And we talked last week about the reality of our times and those statistics. We talked about the command itself and the Pharisee loophole. The Pharisees thought that they had found a way around this commandment. They said, in essence, I would love to take care of my parents, but all that money, I've given it to God. And Jesus did not buy that. In Mark chapter 7, he said, well, how convenient is that? How convenient is that? You gave your money to God, but you have nothing left over to take care of your parents. You set aside the commandments of God for your own selfish reasons. And then there was that warning in 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8, where Paul says, if anyone does not provide for his own family, especially for his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. And many people misconstrue that passage. That passage is not in the context of parents taking care of their children. That passage is in the context of talking about children making a return to their parents. So let's talk about some issues this morning involved in caregiving. Because what I think you have here is the elephant in the room, so to speak. And there are certain issues that become very hard to ignore. Number one, there's the issue of making decisions when your parents may be incapable of making decisions. I've always been a firm believer that most parents want and need to live as independent as they possibly can and for as long as they can. Obviously, that's probably best for a lot of reasons. But I've seen some children jump the gun on their parents. I've seen some children, mom's in her 50s and mom comes into the room and she says, what did I come in here for? I don't remember why I came in here. And the child automatically thinks, oh my goodness, my mother has dementia. What am I going to do? Well, I think all of us have done that before. There have been many times where I've gone into a room. I walk into the room and I look around and I'm like, I came in here for something and I have no clue why I came in here. And I just forget. We all tend to do that kind of thing. And again, some kids get too worked up and excited about all that kind of stuff a little bit too fast. But I think we all recognize in the lives of people that we love that there's going to come a time in which we're unable to manage our own care. or make decisions, or live alone, or cook, and all those sorts of things. I remember when my mother had to take the car keys away from my grandfather. And that was not easy. That was not an easy thing to do, but I think he knew. He knew. He was just trying to maintain a sense of his independence, even though he could no longer drive. When it comes to honor, let me give you 3 don'ts. When it comes to honoring father and mother as they age and situations develop, number 1, don't reprimand your parent publicly. Don't reprimand your parent publicly. Even if you have to take control of a situation, you want to do everything in your power to maintain respect for who they are. Number 2, don't raise your voice to a parent. I don't care how old they are or what the situation is. Children, when you're living at home with your parents, you should never, ever raise your voice to your parents. And older children, when our parents are older, same thing applies. We should never raise our voice to our parents. Pray that God will give you the peace and the strength to remain calm, because there's going to be stressful situations. Remember that passage in 1 Timothy chapter 5 that talks about making a return to your parents. Remember how that entire passage begins. It all begins there in verse 1 where he says, don't rebuke an older man. That's how it all starts out. Do not rebuke an older man. Well, that older man may be your parent or your grandparent. But then number 3, don't embarrass them. Don't embarrass them. Allow them to save face. Help them to maintain a certain level of dignity. When Jesus taught the Sermon on the Mount, he gave that rule. Whatever you want others to do for you, you do for them. Well, treat your parents, even in their old age, and even when you have to begin to make decisions for them, treat them like you would want to be treated if that situation were reversed. We need to help maintain. We need to help them maintain. Even in a state where they can't function independently anymore, to be able to function independently as far as they can and do for themselves as much as they can. You see, that is part of honoring them. Now, honoring is not always easy. It's not. Somebody says, well, what if my parents abandoned me? What if my parents abandoned me? Well, then I would honor them by seeking and not forcing reconciliation. Because you cannot force reconciliation. You cannot force that, but you can seek it, and you can pray about it. Well, what if my parents abused me? It's amazing how many people reflect back to their childhood and their memories are not good. They don't have too many good memories. What if my parents abused me? Well, I will honor them. I will honor them by praying for them and by releasing their sins into the hands of my Heavenly Father, who can handle that burden that is beyond me to be able to handle. What if my parents are unfaithful to God? Well, I'm going to honor them by setting the right example in front of them. And I'm going to honor them by showing Jesus Christ in my life. What if my parents cannot care for themselves and yet they stubbornly refuse my help? Well, I will honor them by seeking advice from others. I'll seek advice from others by seeking advice from healthcare professionals that have been around this, that have experience with this. It really needs to be done for their well-being. Well, what if my parents don't appreciate what I'm doing? What if they don't appreciate it? Well, I'm going to seek to honor them by doing right because it's the right thing to do. You know, when he says honor your father and mother, do you notice he does not say honor your father and mother if they've been good parents? He didn't say that. Honor your father and mother if they've never made mistakes. He doesn't say that either. You see, a lot of adult children nurse a lot of feelings of pain because of their childhood and anger because they grew up. They were hurt in some way by their parents. And when you become a caregiver, a role reversal situation, those emotions kind of come back and they flood your soul. It's not easy. It just suddenly takes you back to where you have been, but now you're in a whole different role. And the solution to the whole thing is not to deny what happened or to pretend that it doesn't exist. The solution is not to just ignore the hurt and the pain. Hopefully through discussion and confrontation and confession and reconciliation and prayer and forgiveness, things will get better. Hopefully. Do you know why most people are afraid to die? Do you know why most people are afraid to die? Most people are afraid to die because they have unresolved issues with their family. Think about that. If you have unresolved issues with your family, you need to try to resolve them. But understand, there's only so much you can do. Paul talks about that in Romans chapter 12 and verse 18 when he says, if possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. That includes your family. But he says there's only so much that you can do. In Mark chapter 14 and verse 8, when Mary anointed the feet of Jesus, Jesus said she has done what she could. She cannot do more than what she could. She could only do what she could. It's the same principle here. You can only do what you can do. But what you can do is pray about the situation and release it. Release it to God. Your parents, even as they age, may not do the right thing. But you can do the right thing. And the right thing you can do is not allow bitterness toward a parent to become your personal cancer that just eats away at your life. Whatever you do, don't allow the cycle of pain that started when you were a child to revisit itself to your children and to your children's children. At some point, you have to stop that. Don't allow what happened to you in the past to hijack your future. That's the message of Joseph in the book of Genesis. In Genesis chapter 41 and verse 51, God has made me forget all my hardship. God is the only one who can do that. In Psalm chapter 27 and verse 10, even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord cares for me. The Lord cares for me. You see, people will forsake you. People will. Even parents sometimes. But he says that the Lord will take care of you. God has a wonderful social security plan for all of us. Parents take care of little children when little children are unable to take care of themselves. And then one day, it comes when children takes care of the parents when the parents are unable to take care of themselves. And that sounds so simple. It does. It sounds simple. But if you've ever been a caregiver, you know that it is not simple. Far from it. It's complex, and it can be very complicated. But one thing I learned from studying all of this is you're not alone. You're not alone. Being a caregiver on any level and to any extent can be a very lonely experience. But you're not really alone. So let me leave you with 6 B's of caregiving. Number 1, be realistic. Be realistic. If you become a caregiver, be realistic. Understand that when you are a caregiver, your world changes. It changes. Everything changes. It's not going to be the same for a while. And so you need to look for options. You may need to look for facilities. You may need to look at services in order to keep them in their home just a little bit longer. You may need to look to others who have been there. But you need to look at their particular situation through real glasses and not rose-colored glasses. Can I provide for mom? Can I provide for my dad? Can I provide for my grandparent in my own home? And to what level can I do that? What can I afford? Those are real questions. They're real questions that you have to ask. And you need to look at your own family dynamic and answer the real question. Is this going to affect my spouse? Will my spouse be supportive of this? And you need to look at your own health dimension. What can I do physically? What is it that I can do physically? There's only so much that I can do physically. There's only so much I can do emotionally. How much can I do? How much can I bear? But please understand, it is not what others think you need to do. It doesn't matter. It's not what you think others expect you to do. You know you, and only you know your family dynamic. So what can I do realistically to help the situation? So we need to be realistic in these circumstances. Number 2, be honest. Be honest. The number one problem of caregivers is usually they try to be everything to everyone. You can't do that. You can't do that. So you try to be a loving spouse. You try to be a nurturing child to your parent or grandparent. You try to be a responsible employee. You try to be a devoted friend. You try to be a volunteer. The list goes on and on and on and on. And when you try to do all of these things, if you're not careful, something has to give. Something has to give. And I'll tell you what gives. Your health will give. Your own health will give. There are limits to what any of us can do. You read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and what you find out is when Jesus was here on this earth and he walked in the flesh, do you realize he could not do it all? He couldn't. Because he voluntarily limited himself to live as we do. And when Jesus went to bed every night, do you realize that there were people in Israel that he had not taught? There were people in Israel that he had not healed. You see, he could not meet every single need. He could not do everything. He could not be in every place. He limited himself voluntarily to walk in our shoes. And sometimes we don't learn that lesson. Sometimes we have the idea that I have to do everything. No, there's a limit to that. Caregiving, and those who have been caregivers know this. Caregiving takes more time and energy than you can possibly imagine. And so you have to be honest with yourself about what you can handle and what you cannot handle. But then third, be well. Be well. Remember the statistics from last week? 90% of caregivers suffer with depression. Why is that? Caregivers have higher blood pressure than the national average. The question is, in caregiving for a loved one, who is going to care for you? See, that's a question. Who is going to care for you? You see, caring for yourself is not selfish. It is not selfish. In fact, Jesus taught that it's the opposite. In Matthew chapter 22, verse 39, he says, love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. You can't care for your neighbor until you care for yourself. Because there's nothing left in the tank. There's nothing left to give. It's easy to become so consumed with our parents' needs that we end up neglecting our own needs. We talked last week about the sandwich generation. Here are the people who are caring for elderly parents in their home, as well as caring for children in the home, all at the same time. That's difficult. It's very difficult. That's why you have to keep connected with friends who can help you. You need somebody you can cry with. You need somebody that you can laugh with. You need to talk to other caregivers. You need to reward yourself somehow and in some way with some time away. We need some time to recharge. Recharge the batteries. And you need to set boundaries. And you need to guard them. And that's not always easy to do. Will others always understand? No. No, they won't understand unless they've been there. Then they might understand. So be well. Take care of you so that you can take care of them. Number 4, be proactive. Be proactive. Nobody knows your loved ones better than you do. So you become their advocate for their well-being. Ask questions and get reliable information. Don't listen to everybody else who wants to tell you what you need to do. You find the information and trust your instincts because you are the best advocate that your loved one has. Find somebody to talk to. Find somebody who can be objective about the situation and not emotional about the situation. Find somebody who has some measure of experience in the life situation that you find yourself in. You know, talk therapy can be really good. Except, I hope that you understand that a therapist cannot take you farther than where they have been. Do you realize that? A therapist cannot take you farther than where they have been. And so when you face a situation like this, you need to talk to somebody who's qualified. Somebody who understands and somebody who has that educational level and somebody who has the experience of life to know what they are talking about. Somebody who has been there, lived it, and got through it. Again, that means you need to be proactive. Number 5, be positive. Be positive. Be a person of faith. This is when your faith really has to kick in. Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 tells us that God is going to work all of this out. God will work everything out. Read the Psalms. Many of the Psalms deal with this kind of thing. Psalms is a great place to go. You know, dilemmas. We don't always have the answer. We don't always know what to do. And it's okay to say, I don't know what to do. But the message of the Psalms is to trust in the one who does know what to do. Number 6, be prayerful. Pray without ceasing, Paul said. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7, casting all your cares on him because he cares for you. So I'm going to leave you with 3 C's very quickly. 3 C's for all of us, even if you are a caregiver or you're not. Number one, don't criticize. Don't criticize. It's easy to have all the answers when you don't know the questions. And sometimes there is a family dynamic that you and I can't possibly understand. You know, I think about James chapter 1 and verse 19. Be slow to speak. Be slow to speak. Don't criticize. Number two, don't compare. Don't compare. Somebody says, well, my aunt's next door neighbor's cousin took care of her grandmother, so I know exactly how you feel. No, you don't. No, you don't. Don't compare. And then number three, don't counsel. Unless you specifically know about the situation. Let's close in the Psalms. Look at Psalms chapter 62. I think this is a great text to end with. Psalm 62, beginning in verse 5. Psalm chapter 62, verse 5. Rest in God alone, my soul, for my hope comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold. I will not be shaken. My salvation and glory depend on God, my strong rock. My refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times. Notice that. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts before him. God is our refuge. And then you see that little musical notation there, Selah. That means to pause and let what was just said sink in. He says, trust in him at all times. Now let that sink in. Again, caregiving is something we don't talk about very much. And again, it's not something that I've heard prayed about very much throughout my life. And I've known a lot of caregivers, again, my mother being one of them. And it was not easy. It was very, very difficult. And those of you who have been caregivers know how difficult it is. There's some of us that have not reached that stage of our life yet, but we may. It's coming. And who do you turn to? You turn to God, but God has given us a family. He has given us a church to be a part of. He's given us others that we can go to that have experienced these difficult things, that can give us good advice, that can help us through these difficult times. You know, I know none of us like to talk about getting older. You know, you hit a point where you don't want people to know how old you are and you don't care about birthdays. It's life. None of us can escape it. Nobody's ever been able to escape it. Tomorrow I'm going to be a day older. The next day I'm going to be another day older, and so forth until my time's up. We can't stop time. But we need to be ready. Because as we adults know, time goes by very fast. Very fast. As James said, life is but a vapor. It's here and then gone. So if you're here this morning and you have not yet rendered obedience to the gospel of Christ, why would you not want to become a part of God's family? To be a part of a family who loves one another, who's going to be there for one another in good times and in bad times. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. A group that is here to help each other get to heaven, because we can't get there alone. We cannot get to heaven alone. We need each other. We need to be lifted up from time to time. We need help. We need advice. And don't ever be afraid to ask for advice, because there are those who will help. If you have a need, we ask that you make it known. Right now, as together we